Hello, my name is Laura Hammonds. I'm a senior at the Pennsylvania State University pursuing a Bachelor of Arts degree in Energy and Sustainability Policy. This is my capstone project for Energy and Sustainability in Society, taught by Dr. Vera Cole and moderated by Karen Jensen. My project covers Massachusetts House Bill 4168, an act to reduce plastic bag pollution. This presentation will cover my research, analysis, and recommendations on House Bill 4168. Enjoy. Hello and welcome to my presentation on House Bill 4168, an act to reduce plastic bag pollution. My name is Laura Hammonds. I am a senior at the Pennsylvania State University pursuing a Bachelor's of Arts degree in Energy and Sustainability Policy. This is the video portion of my capstone for Energy and Sustainability in Society, taught by Dr. Vera Cole and moderated by Karen Jensen. In this section, I'm going to introduce some background information on Massachusetts House Bill 4168, including why bag law is necessary, and this will entail explaining plastic and paper bag pollution. We're going to look at some visuals that illustrate these sources of pollution, and we're also going to go through the legislation details, including its current status, and we're going to examine the stakeholders that I chose. To begin, over the course of this project, I've been asked a lot, well, what's the better choice, plastic bags or paper bags in terms of pollution? And the response that I've kind of decided on is plastic bags and paper bags are two sides of the same pollution coin. Plastic bag pollution is very physical, it's very easy to see. It hits in three main ways: marine deaths, in this case marine life including large marine mammals, fish, and marine birds either ingest or become entangled in plastic, and this usually leads to either their starvation or being stranded. Inland and ocean waterway pollution is any plastic that ends up in a body of water. Most sources of waterway pollution in terms of plastic bags come from land sources, and land-based pollution is mostly bags stuck in trees or in brush in fields. Paper bag pollution is more insidious. It happens during paper production, paper recycling, and transport. While paper bags, if you leave them outside, will biodegrade, unfortunately, when they're being made, it's a very water-intensive and a very energy-intensive manufacturing process, as well as when they're being recycled. It's 98% more energy-intensive to recycle paper than plastic, although paper is more often recycled than plastic. This first image captures marine deaths due to plastic bag pollution. In this image, a green sea turtle is apparently trying to eat a plastic bag. Now this might seem very strange to us, but the sea turtle's main diet is jellyfish, and in the water, plastic bags and jellyfish look very similar to turtles, who unfortunately do not know the difference between a very edible jellyfish and a very inedible plastic bag. Now sea turtles are by far not the only species impacted by plastic pollution. In fact, Midway Island is covered in dead albatross chicks whose mothers bring back plastic from the Pacific Ocean and feed it to their chicks. In both the case of the albatross chicks and the sea turtle, if they eat enough plastic, it sits inside their intestines and they can't digest it, and they will slowly starve to death. There have been whales cut open found with feet and feet and feet of plastic sheeting stuck inside their stomachs, and they essentially starve to death with stomachs full of plastic. As well as ingesting plastic, marine life can become entangled in it and be unable to move about their natural habitats. In the case of the sea turtle, he could eat the plastic and float to the surface of the water and be at great risk for predation by other animals or being struck or captured by humans. Have you ever heard of plastic soup? Well, that is essentially what our oceans are turning into. As you can see in this picture, plastic in our oceans can be very large plastic sheeting, large pieces of plastic debris to plastic bags to cups to small pellets. And this plastic soup happens basically because large plastic sits at the surface of the water and it's baked in the sun, and in the presence of sunlight and salt water, the plastic starts to photodegrade, which means it breaks down into very, very small pieces, and those pieces slowly sink to the floor of the ocean. Now, these very small pieces can be the size of phytoplankton, which are the building blocks of all ocean life. Now, the small fish who would usually eat phytoplankton can mistake these plastic pieces for food. So they eat the plastic, and then the next fish up the chain eats them, and the next fish eats them, so on and so forth, until the very large fish that we eat, such as salmon or tuna or swordfish, eat them, and then we eat those fish. Now basically, the toxins that are in plastic, such as BPA, I'm sure we've all heard of that, bioaccumulate, which means that those toxins get stuck in the fat cells of living beings, and they don't go anywhere. Our bodies can't get rid of them. So we eat these fish who have had BPA through every inch of the food chain, and it has the potential to make us sick, as well as making the environment sick. Have you ever wondered where our plastic goes when we're done with it? Or where that plastic bag goes when it flies out of your grasp and flits off into a field? Usually, they get stuck on something. In the case of this image, they're stuck on a tree. You see this a lot in very urban environments, but you also see it in places where you wouldn't expect to see plastic. Now, aside from just being ugly, no one likes to look at trees or brush full of plastic bags, it's not good for our environments, and that's because every single piece of plastic that we have ever produced in the entirety of human history is still somewhere in our environment. It does not rot, it will never go back to nature. Essentially, it'll break down into tiny little pieces that we can't see, but they're still there. And this has the potential to impact our lives. This image showcases why paper bags are not truly the environmentally friendly alternative to plastic. And this is due to the amount of water and energy paper production uses. As you can see, this timber manufacturing plant was built both close to its natural resource and on a body of water. You can see the pollution, you can see the ugliness. So truly, paper bags are just the second side of the same pollution coin. So, what do we use if we don't use paper and we don't use plastic? The simple answer is a reusable bag. Reusable bag is any bag with handles that is made to be used multiple times. Now, there are hundreds of different kinds of reusable bags in any material and in any format that you could possibly want. We should use them, obviously, because they displace disposable bag use, and that means displacing all of the pollution from plastic and paper. This will reduce water and air pollution, it'll reduce marine deaths, it'll reduce land-based pollution, but it will also, I think, encourage other environmentally friendly behaviors. If you're bringing your bag with you every time you go to the store, maybe you'll start going for fewer packaged items. Maybe you'll start using a reusable to-go cup instead of always getting a morning coffee in a paper cup. My personal brand of choice for reusable bags is the Chico bag. Chico bag comes with a carrying pouch that makes the bag very easy to keep in your car or in your purse or even in a pocket. I always have one with me when I leave the house. Of course, any brand, any bag, any material, if there is a bag design out there for you, I guarantee you someone is making it or someone could. Now that we've established why we should ban the bag, let's get to the legislation. Massachusetts House Bill 4168 was introduced to the Massachusetts House of Representatives by Representative Lori Ehrlicht and Senator James Eldridge. House Bill 4168 bans stores from providing plastic bags to their customers and mandates that stores charge 10 cents for paper bags and reusable bags. Now, only stores that are 3,000 square feet or larger, or stores that have 3 or more chains in Massachusetts, would be affected by House Bill 4168. Some exceptions to bags include produce bags, any bag that you'd get from the pharmacy, dry cleaning bags. Basically, it only covers bags at the checkout. And all the bag fees would be collected as revenue by the retailers. House Bill 4168 was introduced to the Massachusetts House of Representatives by Representative Ehrlicht in April 2016. On the 7th of April, it was recommended by the Committee on Environment, Natural Resources, and Agriculture, and was sent to the Committee on House Ways and Means in that same month. Unfortunately, on the 3rd of January this year, the bill was listed as no further action taken, meaning that it died in committee. There is future legislation in Massachusetts, and we'll examine that at a later slide. Per the assessment guidelines, I had to find 8 stakeholders, 4 of whom supported and 4 of whom opposed House Bill 4168. And these are my supporting stakeholders: Clean Water Action Boston and Clean Water Action Northampton, the Massachusetts League of Environmental Voters, Sierra Club Massachusetts, and the Massachusetts Surfrider Foundation. I spoke to the Massachusetts League of Environmental Voters, Sierra Club Massachusetts, and Massachusetts Surfrider. Unfortunately, I was not able to contact Clean Water Action. Now, as you would guess, these 4 stakeholders support House Bill 4168 because in some way they support environmental legislation or communities taking steps to protect the waters of Massachusetts. Clean Water Action, Surfrider, and Sierra Club all have chapters and organizations around the state and around the country. The Massachusetts League of Environmental Voters is solely a Massachusetts-based organization. All of the stakeholders that I spoke with, supporting-wise, were hopeful and optimistic about legislation in Massachusetts. These are my 4 opposing stakeholders: the American Progressive Bag Alliance, the American Forest and Paper Association, the Retailers Association of Massachusetts, and the Massachusetts Food Association. I tried to speak with the American Progressive Bag Alliance, and I successfully spoke with the Vice President of the Retailers Association of Massachusetts. These 4 stakeholders oppose House Bill 4168 for a variety of reasons. The American Progressive Bag Alliance opposes all bag law, as it feels that plastic bags do not pose enough of a threat to the environment to warrant their banning. The American Forest and Paper Association has said in publications that they believe it is inappropriate for paper bags to be placed under bag laws, as paper bags are not a contributor to climate change or global warming. The Retailers Association of Massachusetts and the Massachusetts Food Association are more unique. They are concerned about a negative consumer response to bag law because it makes consumers pay a noticeable charge for something that they're used to getting for free. They were especially worried that small businesses would lose customers to online retailers or retailers in a different state who are not under a bag law. I built the analysis portion of my paper around similar bag legislation in Ireland, California, and Hawaii. These 3 locations provide unique and significant pieces to a successful statewide disposable bag piece of legislation. We will look at Ireland, California, and Hawaii in greater depth in the coming slides. So let's start with Ireland. Ireland introduced a plastic bag levy in 2002, which placed a 15 € fee on disposable bags. This bag levy was coupled with a social marketing campaign that really sought to change the way the public viewed plastic bag use. It realigned plastic bag use with how people thought of wearing fur or not picking up after your dog in public, and it was wildly successful. At the beginning of 2002, per capita plastic bag use was around 300 bags per person per year. And in the first year, bag use was cut by 90%. The plastic bag levy is still in place today. It's increased to 22 € a bag, and per person bag use is now around 14 bags per person per year. So Ireland really showcased that in order to change people's behaviors, you have to change the way they see plastic bag use. California became the first U.S. state to have formal statewide disposable bag legislation in 2014 by signing Senate Bill 270 into law. Senate Bill 270 and House Bill 4168 are very similar. Both ban retailers from providing plastic bags to their customers, and they mandate that retailers charge for paper and reusables, and retailers get to keep their bag fees as revenue instead of the fee being collected as a tax by the state. Now, although this was signed into law in 2014, it wasn't put into effect until 2016. And this is largely because the American Progressive Bag Alliance fought Senate Bill 270 for 2 years. Proposition 76 put the vote to the public on whether or not they wanted this to be state law. And it passed in 2016, a little narrowly, but it passed nonetheless. And this is important because it shows that consumers and grocers alliances and the people can have the power, although the American Progressive Bag Alliance had the money. Hawaii achieved statewide coverage in a different way. Now, Hawaii only has 5 counties. It's one of the smallest states in our nation. And they achieved statewide coverage through municipal legislation. So every citizen who lives in Hawaii is covered via municipal legislation. And this is really important because they didn't have to go through the hurdles of passing a formal piece of statewide legislation. And this is important for Massachusetts because currently Massachusetts has about 15% of its population covered through city or county laws. And even if statewide legislation isn't feasible now, continuing to focus on the municipal level could achieve success slowly but effectively. And we're going to examine a threat to this kind of coverage in the next slide. Preventative legislation is the new threat to disposable bag legislation at a municipal level. Preventative legislation essentially banning plastic bags. These are laws passed at the state level that tell cities and counties they do not have the authority or the power to tell retailers what they can and cannot provide to their customers. This has been done in 4 states, Arizona, Idaho, Michigan, and Missouri, and only Arizona already had municipal legislation in place. This is important because municipal legislation is really a building block to success at the state level. This was seen in California. California had 150 disposable bag laws at the municipal level before they passed Senate Bill 270. And municipal legislation really shows retailers and it shows legislatures that these laws can work, that consumers can adapt to bringing their own bags or paying for bags. And taking that away makes it much harder for a state to go from no legislation to legislation everywhere. In this section, we're going to look at two new bills currently in place in the Massachusetts legislature, and we're going to look at a study out of California that examines how consumers change their behavior in the face of citywide bag law. Representative Lori Ehrlicht and Senator James Eldridge are hard at work on two new pieces of legislation concerning disposable bag legislation in Massachusetts. These are Senate Bill 424 and House Bill 2121, an act reducing plastic bag pollution. While I haven't read these, I've been too embroiled in House Bill 4168. They're important because they tell the consumers of Massachusetts that their legislatures are fighting for the things that they believe in. And I'm sure that there is hope that eventually bag law will be passed in that state. During my research, I came across a study out of UC Berkeley that examined how human behavior changed before and after municipal disposable bag legislation was put in place. The researchers examined 3 cities: Richmond, Berkeley, and Concord. Berkeley already had disposable bag legislation in place, Concord didn't have any before and didn't have any after, and Richmond was the city where new legislation was put in place. The researchers examined human behavior at 2 grocery chains. Basically, by standing at the checkout lines during different varying times and watching people buy their groceries. They took into account if there was a bagger in place, how many items the person bought, how long the transaction took, and it really gave solid evidence for how bag law is successful. In the next 2 slides, we're going to look at 2 different graphs that examine bag use before and after legislation was put in place. This first graph examines bag use before and after municipal legislation was put in place in the city of Richmond at a national chain and a discount chain. As you can see, there are pre- and post columns for the cities of Concord, Richmond, and Berkeley. In this time period, Concord did not introduce any legislation. Richmond introduced a disposable bag ban and a paper fee, and Berkeley already had legislation in place. There are 6 bag choices for the national chain and the discount chain. Both have thin plastic in black, brought reusable in green, paper in brown, combination of bags in blue, and no bag in white. The yellow column represents bought reusables at the national chain, and at the discount chain, the yellow column is a 15-cent thick plastic bag that the discount chain manufactured and sold. As you can see in Concord, thin plastic is the most popular choice both before and after legislation went into place in Richmond. And in the Richmond pre-column, it's also the most popular choice at both the national chain and the discount chain, more so at the discount chain. And as you can see, obviously, after plastic is banned, in the national chain, about half of that is replaced by paper. There's an increase in consumers bringing their own bag, there's a decrease in the combination of bags, but there's also a steady increase in no bag in both the national chain and the discount chain in Richmond. Surprisingly, or unsurprisingly, in the Richmond Post and the discount chain, a good bit of what is paper at the national chain is the 15-cent thick plastic bag, because you don't have to buy it every time you go to their store. Berkeley is fairly consistent amongst the two. A lot of consumers before and after chose the 15-cent thick bag. And these graphs really illustrate how bag use changes in the face of municipal legislation. This graphic examines reusable bag use and disposable bag use across the country in the face of plastic bag bans and paper fees and plastic and paper fees. The top graph looks at reusable bag use. As we can see, there's the city of Concord, Richmond, a lot of Virginia, and Maryland. Now, with no policy in effect, reusable bag use is around, at most, 15–16%. Now, you introduce a plastic bag ban and paper fee or a plastic and paper fee, and reusable bag use gets up to around 50%. You know, not as good in Richmond, but still, that is a marked increase of reusable bag use. The lower half of the graph looks at disposable bag use. Same cities across national and discount chains. With no policy in effect, plastic bag use, or disposable bag use rather, is around 80–90%. If you ban plastic and charge for paper, or just charge for both, bag use drops to, at best, about 10%, and more averagely up around 40–45%. And this also just drives home how consumer behavior changes in the face of a monetary incentive. In this section, we're going to examine what all of us can do, regardless of where we live, while we wait for municipal legislation or statewide legislation to become available. This might seem a little bit obvious, but bring your own bag. Bringing your own bag is the single most important action for you to take while we wait for any kind of legislation. And this doesn't just have to be to grocery stores, bring it to the grocery store, the pharmacy, when you go clothes shopping. Just consistently bringing your own bag sends the message to retailers that they're buying too many bags, that their customers don't want or don't need bags. The second thing you can do is refuse bags. If you go somewhere and you buy 1 or 2 items that you can easily carry with you, just tell your clerk, I don't need a bag. Just as simple as that, say, I don't need a bag. Third, reusing your plastic and paper bags. You can use them to collect pet waste, to line garbage cans. People have made plastic yarn, as silly as that sounds. And the fourth thing you can do is to recycle your bags. Most plastic bags are made out of, number 2, high-density polyethylene. In this, you can recycle them not in your municipal waste streams, but most grocery stores have bins in their lobbies where you're allowed to put your used plastic bags that you don't want. And number 2, high-density polyethylene is usually recycled into fencing material, decking material. Unfortunately, it cannot be a closed-looped system. As far as I know, it's impossible to make new plastic bags out of recycled plastic bags, and this is due to the dyes used and other contaminants that basically make it impossible to make virgin white plastic pellets out of recycled plastic bags. The second most important thing to do while we wait for municipal legislation or statewide legislation is to speak up and show our support. Tell your retailers that you will continue to shop with them even if you have to pay for bags. Various discount retailers across the country already charge for bags, and they see that it works with their consumers. Stores do not need legislation to charge for bags or to cease carrying them. In my area, Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, Lucky's, none of these retailers carry plastic bags. Also, speaking up to your legislators, telling them that this is what we want to see in our state, or this is what we want to see in our district, or our city, or our county. They work for us, and we have to tell them what we want. In this section, we're going to briefly touch on the recommendations that I have theoretically made to the Massachusetts Surfrider chapter to further encourage, and support disposable bag legislation at the state level in Massachusetts. Part of my capstone paper was to build an action plan for one of my stakeholders. I chose the Massachusetts Surfrider chapter. I wrote a 5-step plan that was continuing to support municipal legislation, continuing to support the legislatures involved with the legislation, encouraging consumers to use reusable bags regardless of formal legislation at the state level, seeking support from the other supportive stakeholders that I mentioned earlier in this presentation, and building a report with the Retailers Association of Massachusetts and the Massachusetts Food Association. So starting with municipal legislation. This step in the plan is basically continuing to support municipal legislation because it really is the building block of state legislation, and it's powerful in its own right. Supporting legislatures is important because without them, there would be no law. It's important to support them. Encouraging consumer use of reusable bags is important because consumers have so much power in this area. It's really up to them to show their retailers and their legislatures that they are behind this and that they are willing to live under disposable bag legislation. Seeking support from Clean Water Action, the Massachusetts Sierra Club, and the Massachusetts League of Environmental Voters is important because it would really bring those audiences, the reach of those audiences, the resources and the power of those organizations together. And building a report with the Retailers Association of Massachusetts and the Massachusetts Food Association is important because those groups hold a lot of power in deciding what gets passed into law in regards to disposable bag legislation. In the case of California, it would have been shaky without the Grocers Association to get a majority yes vote on Proposition 67. Hopefully, by this point in the presentation, we can all agree that bag law is pretty necessary. We looked at the effects of plastic and paper bag pollution. We examined the case studies of Ireland and California and Hawaii and how those each have a unique piece of the puzzle of successful disposable bag legislation. We saw some threats in the form of preventative legislation. While, unfortunately, House Bill 4168 is unlikely to ever leave the Committee on House Ways and Means, everything that I've said in this presentation and in my recommendations could apply to any other piece of disposable bag legislation, especially the two pieces currently being debated in Massachusetts, Senate Bill 424 and House Bill 2121. So even though House Bill 4168 didn't make it, there is still there's still a lot of hope for the future of disposable bag legislation in Massachusetts. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for viewing my presentation. I hope you now have a better understanding of disposable bag legislation at the state level and what can influence this kind of legislation. Please move forward with this knowledge and always remember to bring your own bag. While this is by no means the list of references for my formal capstone paper, these reference the images I used earlier in the presentation and the study out of UC Berkeley.